Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Laura Pottinger. I'm a research fellow in human geography at the University of Manchester. This is the Activist Creatives panel discussion. It's a 90-minute event running until 12:30, and it's an event that's part of the Woven 2025 festival. You can find out more details of what's on in the rest of the festival, which runs until the end of June on Woven's website. As a reminder, this event's going to be recorded, and the recording's going to be made available on Woven's website too afterwards. So today we're going to be exploring how fashion activists, so social entrepreneurs, designer makers, community arts organisations and academic researchers too, are working to rethink the fashion system from the ground up. And I'm delighted to welcome our panel. So we have Letty Pattinson and Letty's mum, Sally, too, Bryony Moore, Nat Walton, Julia Roebuck, Alison Carlin, Fiona Hackney, Vadim Grinovich and Joe Kramer, who are all going to speak today. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves properly in just a moment. Before we start, so I've already reminded you that we're asking everybody to grab a creative project. So if you want to just take a moment to do that now, you can. I also want to just briefly note a trigger warning at the start here, because we have panelists who may be sharing stories of lived experience and at time might touch on themes relating to mental health, loss and suicide. So if you wish to take a break from the session at any point, you're of course very welcome to do so. So we really hope this is going to be a constructive and supportive event, and we'd love to hear your questions to the panel as well. So if you want to add these as you're listening to the Q&A, we'll do our best to respond to them. And we've got some time towards the end to respond to your questions. So first of all, I'm going to ask our 8 panelists to introduce themselves. I'm then going to hand over to Nat Walton, who's going to say a bit more about Woven's work and this year's festival. And then I'm going to pass over to Fiona Hackney, who's going to introduce the Activist Creatives project in a bit more detail. And then we'll move on to some questions to the panel. So Nat, would you like to go first? If we keep these introductions fairly brief, that would be great, and then we can have plenty of time for the discussion.
I'm going to keep it really brief because I'm obviously going to talk about Woven a little bit later on. So I'm Nat Walton. I am the curator of the Woven Festival, which you'll find out about. And we do that through our company, which is called Hatch, which is a small CIC. And we very much look for projects. We're commissioned to do projects where communities come together to instigate cultural festivals. So very much ground up, listening to communities, listening to their creative needs and wants and making them happen.
Wonderful, thanks, Nat. I'm going to follow around the screen, so I'm going to go to Joe next, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I'm Joe Kramer. I'm an associate professor in fashion at Oslo Met University in Norway, but you might be able to tell I'm from Australia originally. My area of interest is I work in sustainable garment design, so particularly looking at how design of clothing can support long-term use and recirculation of clothing to avoid excessive waste. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Bryony, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Bryony and I'm part of the team here at Stitched Up. We're a not-for-profit community benefit society, and our core mission is to inspire action on sustainable fashion. So we were established in 2012 by a bunch of young women, or young at the time at least, who loved fashion and style, but were really overwhelmed by the global impacts of the fast fashion industry and felt kind of powerless to change it. So we set out to create a space where people could come together, learn skills, repair, upcycle, swap their clothes, and also we took donations of fabrics and made those available for creative reuse. We've been going for nearly 13 years now. In that time, we've had 2 different shops, and we've moved from being volunteer run to having a team of paid staff. And we started Manchester's first repair cafe in 2016, and in that time we've seen the movement grow to, I think there's 10 or 12 repair cafes in Greater Manchester now. Everything we do is centered around the idea that sustainable fashion can be something that you do rather than something that you buy, and around the principle of sort of bringing people together to do those things collectively, as a way to sort of connect with one another, pool our resources, and sort of learn and express ourselves together and recognise we can all be part of building a different future for fashion together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bryony. Alison, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Alison. I am the co-founder of Manchester Fashion Movement. We are a small community interest company and a soft activist network. We were founded in 2020 with a view to challenging the narrative on how we view and treat our garments, and encourage people, in everyday conversations to understand how they can play their part in making more considered choices to support positive outcomes for people and the planet. I'd say we're most renowned for our collaborations in designing sort of unique and niche community engagement pieces, inspiring new social initiatives and building creative alliances with communities and brands. But most of all, I'd say capturing the defiant spirit and energy that already exists within the city and the north of England, and igniting, those collisions of ideas and energy to stimulate and promote pro-environmental changes in fashion choices.
Lovely, thank you. Vadim, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Vadim Grinevich. I'm Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at University of Bradford School of Management. I'm also directing the Transformative Entrepreneurship Research Cluster at the university. My primary area of expertise is knowledge exchange between the university and the economy and society. And I'm very much interested in how the values of individuals and communities are translated into action, and what forms of organizing are most appropriate for upholding the authentic values of communities. I have not brought any sewing with me, but I should tell you that I do enjoy sewing. My grandmother was a tailor, and as a child, I learned the trade from her.
That's lovely, thank you. And I imagine we've all got kind of family stories and kind of history like that we could share too. So I'll move on to Julia.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, my name's Julia Roebuck. I live in Huddersfield, and I'm one of the directors of Thread Republic, which is a community interest company based in Huddersfield. On the piazza, we occupy a meanwhile space there, and we run a scrap store haberdashery and deliver a workshop program. So we call ourselves a textiles reuse and skills hub. So teaching textile skills across the board to anyone who will come along and get involved. And we sell fabric and haberdashery through our scrap store, which is fully donated by local businesses and local citizens.
Brilliant, thank you. Fiona.
Yeah, I'm Professor of Fashion Cultures at Manchester Metropolitan University, and I've been doing research with community groups and around this kind of grassroots activism and change for probably about 20 years now. Really don't want to add anything else apart from, thanks very much, all of the people who are on this call, and just fantastic. I'll be saying more about activist creatives. It's all about collaboration for change. Thanks.
Thank you, Fiona. And Letty and Sally.
Hello, we're Letty and Sally. We're a mother and daughter duo who founded TDS, which is the design studio, 10 years ago now. So we specialize in making one-of-a-kind items which are made from dead stock and recycled materials. On the side of that, I'm also a stylist and do a lot of creative direction for upcoming independent brands that have the same ethos as us and are really into their sustainable and recycled clothing.
Hi, so I'm Sally, the mum, and all my life I've been in fashion, from a little child playing with the teenage dolls, etc. Did a degree in fashion, worked in the industry for Marks and Spencer's and Ladybird Children's Wear, and then decided to be a lecturer. Did some part-time lecturing, loved it, loved interacting with students, and set up a department in Chester, stayed there for 30 years, waited for Letty to graduate and join me in a business. And that's what we did. So there we go.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from everybody as we kind of add detail to those brief introductions. I'm going to hand over to Nat now, who's going to say a bit more about Woven and the festival and the context in which we're holding this panel today. So over to you, Nat.
Hi, it's absolutely brilliant to be part of the panel today. We've been in discussions for what seems like quite a long time, so it's nice to be able to bring everybody together from those discussions and to kind of show a real intent for collaboration. And I think that's where I kind of come into it in terms of the Woven Festival. Unlike a lot of the organisations, we are not dedicated to fashion and sustainability. We are very much dedicated to raising awareness of textiles in its broadest sense. But the real heart of the festival is our communities and how we work with our communities. So we were actually founded in 2019 by Kirklees Council, and but we like to say we were funded and founded by the Kirklees Council, but now we are owned by everyone. The festival happens every 2 years, so 2019, 21, bit of a COVID year, 23, and we're now on to our 4th festival as 2025. In 2019, we supported, so my company, Hatch, was commissioned by the council. And rather than coming in and going, this is what a textile festival looks like, we did lots of consultation and conversations very quickly, because we only had from January to June to make it all happen in that initial year. But through those conversations, through being open to listening to people, what their passions were, what their interests were, we were really able to kind of bring on board an incredible programme and collaborators. So in 2019, we had 110 events over a 9-day festival. And at the time, we thought 36 of those events being run by the communities, by makers and by individuals was phenomenal. Absolutely fantastic. So that we weren't running all of the festival, we were inviting people to be part of the festival, we were inviting people to help us shape the festival. And now in 2025, of 130 events that happen in June across that whole month, across the whole of Kirklees, 120 are run by communities and individuals. So really kind of taking that time and building up the profile and building up that communication and the listening and working with each other, we've really been able to create a festival that does feel like it's owned by Kirklees people, and their passion really drives it. And it's absolutely fantastic that the festival itself, we sometimes set a theme mainly because people want it, not because we have to go, the theme is this. People go, what's our theme this year? Which is lovely. So we kind of respond thematically to what people are interested in as well. And therefore people can then help to respond in their own ways to the festival. And it encompasses everything that you can think of. It's so broad ranging. People come out obviously and do their yarn bomb trails. So this year we've got 18 yarn bombs happening across the whole of Kirklees, and communities all coming together to make that happen. People get inspired by the last festival, and so we've got a continuing conversation around natural dyes and how we can support the environment and our own creativity. We've got history talks, we've got exhibitions. Our industry and mills, they open up their doors to behind the scenes tours, which is absolutely fantastic and shows the dedication that the industry in Kirklees really appreciates and wants the community to be part of the industry as well. Also through partners like Thread Republic, and thank you Julia, and the Creative Piazza, Woven is able to be an umbrella and able to be a part of lots of different events across the calendar of Kirklees as well. So last weekend gone, the Creative Piazza, which is in the centre of Huddersfield Town Centre and is made up of a collective of creatives, took the town and held the Pride events. And Woven was part of that because of our partners. So we love the fact that we are not leading, but we are an umbrella for everyone else to take the lead. So as you can tell, I'm passionate about the fact that we strive to empower groups to make the festival happen for themselves. We do recognise that this takes a lot of volunteer people power and a whole lot of passion for textiles. People are really passionate about the textiles, but also the place where we live, our heritage and our community, and that really comes through as every part of the festival. In this day and age, I really do feel that the biggest act of activism that we've got at the moment is coming together. So in a time when those in power struggle to bring us out of financial difficulty, emotional and So in politics, I really do feel that we're at a time of struggle. So financially, emotionally, health and well-being, we're at a crisis point. Creativity and community defies all of this and overwhelmingly brings us together with a glimmer of joy and hope. When people are taking their fear and pain out on the streets, and we've seen that in some of the streets that are close to our hearts, when communities are smashing up buses and buildings literally around the corner, our communities are picking up their scissors, they're picking up their needles, and they're fixing things and trying to fix our community. In a world where it's easy to take people down, our community is putting things up with wool. When they say there's no jobs, our industry shows new ways of manufacturing. When they say there's no money, our community takes to the second-hand shops and creates new from old. So I think you can kind of tell I love the Woven Festival. I think although it's very broad and we are talking about fashion and activism here, we talk about all of those things and sustainability through the conversations that we have at the Woven Festival. It's quiet activism, but that's a real people power. It's creativity and community at its absolute best for me, and we love making it happen. And so it is going to happen until the 30th of June. So we are absolutely in the thick of it, which is just brilliant. And the vibe is wonderful. And just to kind of say in relation to what we're talking about today, and something that I hadn't thought about because we didn't have it when we started all of these conversations, is we're actually showing Kirsty MacLeod's red dress at the moment. And it's in Oakwell Hall, which is one of our heritage buildings. And literally yesterday, I went over to just check on things, as you do, make sure everything's running all right. And a lady, so the red dress, if you don't know about it, was made over 13 years, contributed by 380 embroiderers from 51 countries. Each stitch tells a story, and it is the most beautiful thing. But a lady walked out of the room holding her chest, and I was really kind of, is she all right? And the lady kind of holding the door said, "Oh, how did you enjoy the dress? Did you like it?" And she just burst into tears. And I think that's where the power of creativity, the power of coming together, the power of textiles, the power in terms of bringing people around fashion really hits you. And something like the red dress can make such an emotional response in people. And I think those are the moments that we've all got to kind of come back to, remember, like I say, in times when it can feel really, really difficult. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Nat. And I think these kind of themes around the power of textiles, of stitch, of fashion are things that we're going to be revisiting across the discussion today. And also thanks to Nat for joining us in the middle of what's obviously a very busy time. And I'd really encourage everybody to have a look, if you haven't already, at the festival programme and what else is on over the next couple of weeks. We're going to move on now to Fiona, who's going to say a bit more about the Activist Creatives project and research, which is why we've kind of all come together. So Fiona, over to you.
Thanks. Well, I think that's so powerful, Natalie. I can only echo that, and also the importance of the emotional response, and the quiet, soft activism, whatever you want to call it. We use the term quiet activism, but we also think about everyday activism. And our research project is very much about that. It's about the power of quiet. It's about the power of creativity, it's particularly in this case, making and repurposing and repairing and stitching. We're very interested in those creative kind of acting, the power of community, as Natalie expressed, the importance of working collectively, and how all these things on the ground, very much grassroots, very much engaging people, very much our research is co-creative. It's very much with people, not on people, as research in the past used to be. We're very much about everybody's a researcher, and everyone's a maker and everyone's a designer. We're very interested in all of that kind of connectivity and how that kind of activities can bring about change. So in terms of research, in terms of the Activist Creative Research Project, it sort of came from work that I've been doing before with multiple stitch groups. We've had funding from the Arts and HRC, which is the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who in the past have been absolutely great about recognising the power of communities and the importance of culture in communities and the importance of academics getting out of universities and getting into community spaces and public spaces and working with industry and individuals. Which is great. You know, our country, and Natalie was saying, you know, we're in a time of semi-crisis, aren't we? I know we're in a time of semi-crisis all the time, but you know, we really, I think we're at a time, so I won't talk about higher education too much, but we're at a time where we're kind of rethinking that, I think. And I think the kind of work that we can do, the research we can do, working with community groups and businesses and other small businesses on the ground, is just so important and so purposeful. So we're very much interested in research that can bring about change. In terms of fashion, it's all about sustainability, if you want to use that term. There are many others, but essentially it's about rethinking our relationship with clothing and fashion. So reimagining the fashion system so it can all be more pro-environmental. We were involved in a previous project that I did with the Fixing Fashion report, government Fixing Fashion report. Do have a look. This is a few years ago now, but we were included in that. Do have a look at that. It's still a really useful resource for anybody who's interested in change in fashion. And we wanted to continue that work from this work from that project. I think it probably started when I met Alison, who's going to speak to you shortly, from Manchester Fashion Movement, and just was so impressed by people like herself and Julia and all the Bryony, all the others on this call, and really what they're doing and how they're and so. But what we want to do is think about how we can help them do it better, how we can evidence what they're doing. And how we can think about, share good practice, share knowledge, etc., etc. So this project's very much about that. So I brought together the people here and the universities involved as well to do that. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it at that because I know we've got lots of people here that want to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for that great introduction. And yeah, I'm sure we'll hear more about that as we kind of go on with the discussion too. So we're going to move now into some questions. First of all, I think I'd like Alison and Julia to respond to the first question, if that's okay. So what I'd like to hear about first is, what is an activist? And would you describe yourself as an activist? So Alison, if you want to take a lead on that one, and then we'll move to Julia, if that's okay.
Well, I think I used to struggle with the term. Well, so when MFM started and people used to refer to us as like an activist, soft activist movement or an activist movement, I was like, oh, I wasn't too sure how I felt about it to begin with, because I was sort of struggled with the term activist, because I always felt like, you had to be like on the front lines and whatever. But obviously over time, I started to recognize that the quieter forms of activism, like storytelling and stuff, being creative and being an activist are two different, both involve imagining something that like doesn't exist yet and making it happen. And they both require courage and disruption and care as well. So, it kind of starts with like, what if things were different? And I suppose like my own path into activism with MFM wasn't through like a big moment. It was like a gradual thing. it really started when I was sat at like the traffic lights and I seen this massive billboard in Manchester. It was like huge, and I couldn't quite believe the size of it. And it was advertising a fast fashion brand, and I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. And then I was aware of all these amazing creatives around the city and around the north of England doing amazing work, designing and making really beautiful pieces, individual pieces. And, I was like, who's shouting about them? And then that really was the catalyst, I think, for the start of MFM. And it seems crazy now when you're seeing France, banning all that sort of stuff. Like, and that was, and that's great to see, all that sort of outdoor advertising for fast fashion and stuff. When that was really the sort of spark for me that day when I seen that massive billboard. I mean, as you can tell, I come from the north of Ireland, so I've grown up in a place where, protest and resistance was daily life. So when I moved to England, there was an absence of that. Obviously, this was 30 years ago. It was for a tiny bit, it was a bit of a relief, I suppose, because I was, 18. But very soon, I've come full circle and I've realized the absolute importance for activism and all forms of activism. So now I feel much more comfortable with MFM being a soft activist movement, because, soft activism takes all forms. There's lots of acts of activism, isn't there? So, I guess, especially in the face of, the injustices and crises that are going on at the minute, the work that I do focuses on, creating positive climate champions, and helping people, understand their clothing habits and reimagining fashion as a tool for sustainability and justice and stuff. So I've come to see that these small shifts, and choosing better and caring more and asking questions are all activism too. So yeah, I'm fine with the term now. I've I'm fine with it. I was a bit funny about it to begin with, but yeah, I'm absolutely 100% fine with it now. Quite proud of it, actually, that I'm like can call myself that, actually.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, so it's interesting, and I wonder if others share kind of similar journey towards being able to accept that label of activist. Julia, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really, I think a lot of people will resonate with that, Alison. And I think the reason that people might try and avoid it is because I think it's quite a polarizing, or seems to be quite a polarizing thing. When we've thought about it historically, there's been quite significant changes that you want to see, and people can become quite extreme through that activism. And in that polarization and that extremism, you lose a lot of people. And I think that something that I've always wanted to do with my work is include as many people as possible with that. So calling myself an activist seemed quite at odds with the thing that I was actually trying to achieve. But as I've got older, and I feel like as the activism that you inspire to change, I think actually what I want to change wouldn't have been radical 50 years ago. Like, the thing has stayed the same, but what's happened is that the world has changed so significantly that now the thing that I just loved to do and always thought was quite normal is now quite a radical act, and lots of quotes around repair and mending and making. So it's not necessarily that we have chosen these extreme things to associate ourselves with, but the nature of how our corporate, globally connected industrial frameworks for the things that we love have completely wiped out so many aspects of this fashion textiles culture that we hold in complete reverence. When that becomes in danger, then I think stepping out of your comfort zone and making the change, but in a very inclusive way. So Fiona, I love that you call about that gentle activism, and then the rise of craftivism and sort of embedding things in communities and showing people that change and actively seeking out change isn't necessarily difficult or polarizing, that there's a ways in which we can do these things together, and people come at it from very different perspectives as well. You know, in Huddersfield, we have people come and be part of our network and our community because they are very activist, and that they are very clear on what they want changed and what needs to change, and they're quite political. We've got people who come in and one of the first things they say when they're volunteering is, this isn't a political movement, is it? I don't want to get involved with politics. You know, and as a CIC, we can't, you know, like we say very clearly, this is not about politics, and it's hard to try and actively kind of suppress that at our events and Stitch socials, because some people are, but we have to, you know, just calmly reassure them that this isn't the time or place to get into those conversations. But that actually the beauty of working with textiles and with clothing is that anybody can come and everybody has a story, especially where we are in Huddersfield with the textiles heritage of manufacturing that we have. Everybody's welcome in, and that activism is very different depending on what people are doing, but the gentle approach that we have and the inclusive approach that we have, I don't feel is completely juxtaposed to calling myself an activist anymore, when we are able to engage people with the broader kind of context of the problems and the trauma really that's caused as a result of the corporate model of this industry.
Yeah, I definitely think that the more we open up the definition of activism, you know, the more people will feel like they can belong within it, you know, rather than like you were saying before.
Yeah, and like you said, Alison, you are proud. It's an empowering thing, I think, once you kind of get people to feel like that, you know, knitting their own socks or darning their own socks, you know, it might have been something that their grandma taught them and they'd never thought about it like that before. But when they understand actually how important those skills are to be passed on, they feel there's a pride there in standing up for something that is now quite a revolutionary thing to do.
Thank you, both of you. That's really interesting. Some really interesting responses to get us started there. And it sounds like quite a delicate balance to pitch the type of activism that you're doing in a way that can be inclusive. Building on that question around activism, the next question I wanted to ask is, what does it mean to be creative, and how does creativity come into the activism that you're involved in? And I'd like to go to Letty, Nat, and Bryony with this question. So Letty and Sally, if you want to go for it next.
Okay, so creativity has always been a part of my life, especially having a mum as a fashion designer growing up. You instilled that in me, didn't you, at such a young age, especially at school, kind of going against the system of like more, I don't know, cleverer subjects. You kind of really push the creativity, and it's such a you know, it's not a glamorous industry to be in, is it? It's hard work, and it's very practical, and it's something that I just loved and have always been surrounded by. But I guess it's not all just about like art or design and making things look good. It's in terms of activism, it's also like how we solve problems and challenge systems and imagine better futures. And I think for our brand, for the design studio, that constantly shows up in everyday choices. It's down to how we source materials, how we refuse overproduction, how we like tell our story through our brand, and like, you know, center individuality and sustainability. And that in itself is activism. And I think, like, you know, it's all about emotion and visibility, and you want to make people stop and feel something, don't you? And that's what we try and do with our brand, and that's something that you as a fashion design lecturer and my mum has always like tried to instill in me as well.
Yeah, I think it's you know, creativity, it's such a strong word, isn't it? And I think everybody has creativity in them in all walks of life. And I use that word sometimes, and sometimes it might sound a bit elitist, but it's not at all, because I think, like going back to Julia and going back to Bryony, really, people have always got creativity, and as a way of coming together, you can all channel that, you know, together. And you know, that's what how you become activist as well. You're going against fast fashion, I suppose, is the main line of it all. Having been a designer all my life, and I've been in the industry, there was never that chance to be individual. You always had to sell whatever you were producing. You got your next pay rise by the amount that's sold. And I was so interested about Alison and the billboard as well. And, you know, it's there in front of you all the time, isn't it? And I was in that industry, and it took a while. And when I talked about it with Letty, I said I had to be quite brave and step back from that, really, and go against fast fashion. And it is a big step to take. And it is, I'd like to say what Alison says, a soft approach, I have to say. But we are staying true to our brand. We are not overproducing. We are keeping, we use a local person to help us with linings and things. We use dead stock fabric. We try and keep it sustainable, really. And we don't want people to buy. We don't mass produce. We've been approached by big stores. Can you send us 100 of this? And no, we don't want to.
Yeah.
So
and I think for me as well, when I finished university, everyone was like, "Oh, you're going to go to London and work for these big fashion houses?" And I was always against that, because I thought, why is it always London as well? There's so much creativity that happens up north. And when we used to say to people we're based in up north, they assume North London. And we're called the Design Studio Harden, which is the village we live in North Wales. And people would ask what Tube Line Harden was. And we just couldn't believe it. So in a way, that's soft activism against going to the south. We love that we're based up north, which I think is.
Although I am a southerner,
you are a southerner, but I think that's a really important thing. There is so much craft up north, and there's so much talent and creativity, and we're so proud of that. So sorry, we went on a bit there, but yeah.
But I also think, you know, having taught many students and creativity, and we're going to have to go to London. I said, no, you're not going to have to go to London. Stay here, you know, be brave. And it's just, you know, Manchester's brilliant fashion, Liverpool, brilliant fashion, you know, we've got the best fashion up here. So we have made that stand, haven't we, really? And yeah.
Can I just say thank you for declining the big orders and staying, like, because it means now when you buy one of your products, you've got that self-expression in yourself and like individuality, because you know no one's going to have the same jacket as you. So
That's
thank
what
you
we
for
all.
that. Stuck to me. Buy something of yours, you know you're the only person in it.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we try to stay with. Yeah.
So I think that point about kind of place leads nicely into Nat, if you'd like to say a bit about in terms of Woven and how you think about creativity and creativity and activism in the context that you're working into.
I kind of think it's better for Bryony to talk about Manchester at this point, and I can come in later. I'd love to see, just because I've spoken already, so if that's all right, I think it would be lovely to hear from Bryony, and I'll chip in.
Sure. Yeah. Over to you then, Bryony.
I'm a adopted Mancunian. I'm also a southerner by my roots, but we are all very fiercely proud of being in Manchester and the importance of the heritage of this city and the north in general in terms of the fashion industry. I think echoing kind of what's already been said, I was just sort of nodding away to everybody, because we really strongly agree that sort of being creative is just part of being human. There aren't creatives and not creatives. It's just that there's less opportunities for lots of us to be creative nowadays in our daily life. And that is a real loss, because there's a kind of self-confidence and like self-realization that comes from making something yourself or learning a new skill. And you know, I still get as an adult, I still get that same feeling that I did when I was a kid when I've made something. It's just that kind of like sort of joy moment, and just like you kind of feel accomplished and feel like you can do stuff, which is just a good thing. And we love to see that day to day when we're teaching people how to sew. I think, you kind of people of all ages, you just see that joy in their face. They light up when they've made something themselves. I think Alison as well made that point about creativity as problem solving, and it's so true. You know, it's a kind of place where you can step back and think about how you can make something happen, how you can imagine something that isn't there. And I think there's so much creativity within activism, and the two things are just kind of melded for me. I think they're one and the same. I think maybe using the terms maybe divides them up more than they actually are in real life. I think they are just of one and the same. You know, activists will solve problems, find ways to engage people in the conversation. They're working together and just reimagining the future. It's all one and the same. And we do at Stitched Up, we do engage in what people might happily label as activism. So supporting campaigns and amplifying the case for garment makers who've been sort of left without pay or whose factories have been shut down. And, you know, we do that sort of stuff, but we do also think that everything we do is activism. So even if it's just teaching someone how to make clothes, we often in our courses don't even mention sort of fast fashion and its impacts in our classes. We're just teaching people how to make their own clothes, and it's so many times we see that penny drop with people when they've spent like 10 hours making a t-shirt, and then at the end of it they're like, how am I buying this for £2 in a fast fashion shop? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, we just and I think as well, a lot has been said about community, because we're sort of talking about activist creatives here, but community is just a thread that's running through this whole conversation, because activism, creativity, and doing all of that stuff together, it's how we sort of reimagine the future, how we start building something different. So that's just a key part of our work, really. It's just like trying to get everyone to kind of come together and feel part of something and start building for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bryony. Nat, do you want to come in with any kind of final comments on that question there?
Yeah, I think it's really hard for me because I come from the visual art world originally, and so I kind of my headspace sits slightly differently when I think about creativity, because I do have problems with it in the sense of the stigmas and the hierarchies that we place around creativity. And, you know, every child should be an artist, absolutely 100%. But at the same time, people have to make a living out of being an artist or a designer. And I'm always kind of conflicted in creativity, in that kind of professionalization of it, because people do need to kind of use that creativity to earn money. But at the same time, preaching and working in a field which is very much about that everyday creativity and recognizing the power of creativity, particularly, like we've all said, to bring people together, that power of creativity to create a group, and a group conversation and make change, the power of creativity in terms of our mental health and well-being, and really kind of looking at how creativity can put us on a journey. People are talking about care, and I think creativity and care go hand in hand, and that's really interesting. I equally think that it's, like I say, for me, it gets a little bit problematic in that whole kind of sense of, well, who decides who gets to be a designer and who gets to be an artist when we're all doing creative stuff every day. So I have no answers to it, but it is something that I tackle. But like Bryony, you know, I'm kind of thinking about 2 days ago, literally every day is a woven day, sorry. But, you know, doing a yarn bomb with a community who's never done anything like this before, and working with ladies who are in a bereavement group and a cancer group, and various different community groups coming together. And every single part of that yarn bomb tells a story, and every single part of that has a joy and delight in it. And for me, that's the thing that I want to hold on to in terms of creativity, is that joy, is that delight, like Bryony says, the making of something, achieving something, whether that's as an individual or as a collective. And so with all the problems that surround it, I like to hone in on those moments where creativity is about that pleasure, that joy, that creation, and that achievement.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for those really, really interesting answers, and hopefully we can dig in a little bit further to them as we go. I want to move on now to a question around storytelling. thinking about the kind of stories that you want to tell through your work and your activism. I think we'll come to Julia and Letty in a moment, but I want to start with Vadim. And kind of specifically here, thinking from the sort of entrepreneurial perspective. And I wondered if you could reflect on how entrepreneurs are placing more emphasis on the why of what they're doing rather than the what through the kind of stories that they're telling.
Absolutely. Storytelling is a very big part of what we cover in our entrepreneurship curriculum, because today's most impactful stories begin not with what we do as businessmen or entrepreneurs, but why we do it and why we care. And what we teach students in business and management schools, that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And this idea was coined by Simon Sinek many years ago, and it's become very popular. And what he was telling, that your why should be quite clear. It should focus on the impact. You should be truthful to who you are rather than aspirational. So you have to be very authentic, and you need to connect to all aspects of your life when you're communicating your why. And if you do so, essentially, it will help you to connect emotionally with consumers. It will help build credibility. It will help differentiate you as a purpose-led enterprise in a very, very crowded and competitive space. But storytelling is also, very much linked to activism, and storytelling becomes activism once it helps shift public, perceptions about something. Once people start doubting dominant narratives and dominant stories, once it helps reframe old assumptions and imagine new futures and inspire actions. So what, again, I'm trying to do in my classroom, I'm just trying to send a message that storytelling is not just about raising awareness. It's more than that. So you have to indicate how you may organize things differently, how you can deploy non-conventional sources of funding, although conventional sources are still important, but also sending a message. You, of course, need to accept existing conventional, let's say, structures, and maybe smart enough to play with the system, grow up, become stronger, and then try to activate your resistance spirit if your value systems are against those established narratives. And what is also important, and this is what I hear today, storytelling is most powerful when it is about those who are directly affected or impacted. And storytelling is, and you can see also these examples from sustainable fashion movements or companies. They try to tell stories which are told not by them, but by their consumers, or stories which are told with consumers. Stories which are not necessarily very polished, stories which may be very messy, but this what connects us as human beings. We are not perfect. We are not perfect, and we are full of flaws, and that connects us with sustainable brands or sustainable fashion brands. And what I've heard today, for instance, I noticed for myself that one big story is how important where we are coming from. I mean, probably everybody mentioned those roots, and how sustainable fashion and the creative activities help us to regain a sense of anchoring with where we are coming from. So probably, yeah, I would stop here. I would still maybe emphasize one more very famous frames from business studies, which is connected to why to some extent, because you need to connect your why to whys of your consumers or your followers. What the consumer buys and considers value is never a product. It is always what a product does for them. So this is how you can connect. If your product can evoke certain feelings or make you feel happy, and if you can see purpose in buying or connecting with that product and what it does for you, this would amplify impact you can achieve.
Thank you, Vadim. And I think we're going to come to that question of impact in just a moment. But first, I'd like to go to Julia and Letty. And just perhaps very briefly, just mindful of time, could you tell us a bit more about the types of stories that you're telling and you're wanting to kind of share through your work?
Yeah, so I think with us, storytelling is a huge part of our brand and how we're here today, really, because obviously we're a mother-daughter duo and we have our own sustainable fashion brand. But there is a personal story to that because I lost my dad quite tragically to suicide when I was only 16. So you encouraged me to turn to creativity as a form of therapy and a creative outlet. And that was just so soothing and such a part of my growing up, and the reason why we have a brand today is because we kind of told that story through our creations and how we turned to crafting and you know, being sustainable, making things at home, how that actually turned into a very successful fashion brand because people loved hearing that story and not just hearing the story, but seeing, you know, real hands making things in our studio and all the videos of you at the sewing machine. I think, you know, people really want to know where their clothes have come from and who's making them. And also the transparency in that, you know, a breakdown of, you see such cheap clothing today and people don't bat an eyelid, but with us, we break it down like, well, the electricity it took to make that, the time, the cutting out, every element of how our clothes are produced is such a huge part of our story, aren't
yeah,
they?
And I know that we were saying before that, you know, we're all creative, but you do have to make a living at the end of the day as well. So we do have to factor in certain costs, but I always go back to the thought that, you know, Vivienne Westwood and Chanel always said, buy one thing, invest in it, and buy a good, well-made thing that can take you through, which is timeless. I know not everybody can afford to do that. So we tried to create things that were affordable, but yet were different and would last. In a way that has gone against our business because people say we've had a TDS for 6 years and we don't need another one because it's lasted
and it's made so well.
and with the storytelling, it has been brilliant because, I mean, during COVID we didn't go out and we didn't dress up, and then after COVID we had so many people getting in touch saying we put our TDS jacket on and we felt ready to go back out in the world again.
And the confidence as well, and the stories from our own customers and clients all around the world that we hear about how our clothing makes them feel. They are individual. It represents them. They can express themselves through our design. So yeah, it's so powerful storytelling, and I think like the creative side of it as well, but also how we doing better as a brand, how we, you know, using more more sustainable fabrics and more sustainable tactics are all part of it.
Yeah, and trying to produce garments that people will keep. You know, 40% of fashion made is wasted. And a lot of the things we buy ourselves never get worn, but hopefully we're trying to build into that. But it sounds as though it's our business, but within those clothes that we make, we also used recycled fabrics. And if I can just say that, we do a lot of crochet cardigans and crochet in our bomber jackets. And we love it if somebody gives us a blanket and says, you know, we find out it's got a providence that they sat with their mum and made it while they were poorly, or it came from a great aunt. So that does come into it as well, doesn't it? And I love that. And I piece together pieces
that tell a story.
And all our garments have a name. And that gets really nice. So we're doing one at the moment, and it's Dorothy because it was her blanket. And my late mum sat and designed a jacket for us, and we called it Nana. So, you know, I know that sort of loose storytelling, but it does. And you put that on your socials, and people do engage, and we do try and make it realistic fashion, not just big billboards industry. You know, so
Thank you, Sally and Letty, for so much for sharing that. And I think there's really interesting points there about the kind of multi-layered storytelling that goes on in so much of the work we do. It's not just the story of the product and the kind of unseen parts of that process, but the materials and the fabric you're working with has its own stories, and there's that reciprocal kind of story sharing with people when they kind of have the clothes, and the clothes go on and have a new life of their own. So yeah, that's really fascinating. Julia, if I can ask you to just come in, and if you have any thoughts that you'd like to add.
Yeah, definitely. Just on that theme of materials, really. I mean, through the haberdashery, it's such a treasure trove of a random mashup of donations. So we stock kind of industry surplus with button boxes that have been kept in lofts for 50 years and everything in between. And we really try and promote materials first approach to the creatives that come in and buy from our haberdashery. So if they come in and want 3.5 meters of pink binding, they're not really our customer. We'll say, okay, well, explain how we work. And then again, that's something that's quite new to them. So, you don't have regular suppliers or regular stock of anything. No, you know, and once it's gone, it's gone. We don't move stock on every 2 weeks. Like, we keep it until it sells. We had, you know, if it gets to about 3 years and it's definitely not shifted, we'll donate it to Hatch and to use at woven workshops. But we really try and tell those stories too. And a lot of the time people can kind of guess the stories. You know, it's a button box, it's got some beautiful vintage pieces in it. There's a lot of fun that goes into kind of guessing, because we don't always know. Sometimes the donations are brought in and the people just leg it if they've only got 10 minutes left on their parking. But we do try and encourage people to share with us what it means, and not just so that we can then pass that on to our volunteers and customers. And in no way is this like a systemized thing, because it would need hundreds of stories to be told, and we're not, again, like the systems and the infrastructure for that. But the stories allow us to break out of those, Vadim, you mentioned those kind of conventional structures. We live in a very linear economy. So being able to tell stories that help us to break out of that and enable an understanding of circularity and a very local community level as well. You know, people who are donating live not very far from where we are. So these are local stories that we're telling about really talented local makers, or not in some cases. Some people just bought a whole load of stuff and it really didn't work out for them. They're kind of ditching it, but they don't want to bin it. They don't want to go to the hassle of selling it. The charity shop won't take it. These spaces like these reuse haberdasheries, I want one in every town. So we need the stories of their kind of incoming donations, but also when it's outgoing. So we try and like encourage that materials first approach. So some people might gravitate towards a particular part of the shop, and I always try and kind of tell them a story quickly about something, and 9 times out of 10 they end up buying it. So even if they were just thinking about, you know, we've got loads of cones that have come from a rug company, they're all recycled yarn, but instead of just replacing one cone, it's more efficient for that business to replace 500 cones as soon as one goes down. So that means they've got 500 cones with only 10 meters of yarn left on them. And oh my goodness, that would have gone in the bin. Yeah. And oh, it's recycled cotton. Yeah. And it's being made just 10 minutes down the road. Yeah. And then you have a conversation about where that mill is. Oh, my grandma used to it, that other thing. So there's the history and the heritage that's really kind of powerful. And when we're talking about storytelling and emotion and things we have in common, but then that joy of turning something that would have been thrown away into something new, giving an extended life to something that the previous owner had no use for, because of these corporate infrastructures that place pressure on efficiency and low cost and convenience. We try to be a bit of an antidote to that.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for that really rich answer. I'm going to move on now, and I'd like to hear from Joanne, that we've not heard from yet. So be really interested to know a bit more about the communities that you're working with in the context of Oslo. So we can come to you that way, and then I'll ask Bryony and Alison to just briefly chip into that, because I'm mindful of time and we've got some questions coming up in the Q&A. But we'll go to you next, Jo.
Thank you. I should explain, although this is largely a UK-based project, it's been great that there is like a satellite to that project happening in Oslo, where we're looking at the sort of synergies and contrasts that happen within the remaking and redesign communities that are happening in Oslo. And just listening to you all talk, I can reiterate the same themes coming through what's happening here in Oslo as well. So these organisations that I'm working with, it's really a community that's coming around these actions around creativity with textiles and clothing, all around reuse and remaking practices, and really engaging people with these alternative ways of participating in fashion that is not this passive engagement with the fast fashion model. So there are two organisations that we're looking at in Oslo, particularly for fashion activist creatives. One of them is Relove. Relove's been around for 15 years. It's started by an amazing woman, Alina Medbø. She's a textile artist, and she's brought a range of other really professional textile artists to work with particularly young people in programs around redesigning and remaking of clothing. And this has evolved into programs where, you know, parents might bring along younger people, but then actually also get involved in the activities that the young people are part of as well. So underlying an organisation like that is actually a system, a value system. So I've been hearing some, you know, that there are motivations over and above just sharing skills around creativity and different ways of engaging with fashion. And when you look at a website for an organisation, I think like something like Relove and perhaps some of the organisations here as well, it's not always so apparent actually what these sort of social structures that sit around these organisations and activities actually provide for their communities. And as a researcher, that's something that I'm really interested to understand more about, sort of what brings communities to these organisations like Relove. And then what is the impact sort of going forward of having engaged with these kinds of activities in terms of keeping garments in use perhaps, or changing practices of clothing care. So it's really good to actually sort of have a bit of a think about what's happening in somewhere like Oslo, which has a similar kind of demographic profile in a lot of ways to a British community, generally speaking, but obviously culturally and geographically in a different location. Did that capture everything, Laura? I think there was a second.
Great to hear from a slightly different perspective, and also from the perspective of a researcher, exploring some of these organisations and issues too. I'm just going to ask Bryony and Alison to just briefly, if that's okay, just to come in, and if you can just maybe say a little bit about what's most important to the communities that you're working with.
Should I go first?
You want to go, right?
Yeah. I think it varies with us. I mean, we work with different communities, so we sort of work with our sort of wider community, who are just people who are local to us. They have various motivations for wanting to come along. Might be that they want to live more frugally or just learn some new skills. And then we've got our community of interest, who are the people who are just really behind our reason for doing what we do, really engaged in sustainable fashion and want to help be part of making a different future. And then we also work with specific groups as well, might be people who support like charities and organisations supporting young people or vulnerable adults, and we'll work with them to do partnership projects so we can provide free access to our work for people who wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise. So yeah, in terms of how we work with them, it's been said a lot of times before, and Nat was saying it at the beginning, it's all about kind of listening to what the community want and need. So we'll do surveys, we just speak to people verbally, and we just do what we can to deliver the kind of things that they're looking for. So yeah, it's very much a listening sort of process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bryony. Alison.
I suppose we're trying to, like Bryony said, we have a real strong supporters of MFM that come to lots of our events and are real big advocates, but then we're trying to get to the disengaged, the people that aren't engaged and are, sort of meeting them where they are on their journey and trying to help them along to introduce them to certain brands or ways, or, introducing them to Bryony's organisation and stuff like that. So I guess we're always thinking about how to get to different demographics and how they engage, because everybody sort of will engage differently. So we're pitching the same messaging, but we pitch it differently to whoever we're talking to. So whether that be a school in Manchester with young people, or we did an event in a really beautiful block of apartments where the demographic was completely different. And then partnering with organisations like RHS Bridgewater so that we can connect that sort of idea of horticulture and fashion. So, quite a lot of the people who were attending that are members and stuff, so not necessarily coming because they're coming for the fashion sustainability element, but then they've gone away and told us that they've picked up lots of tips, and they were inspired because they felt something, because they watched the fashion show and there was a story. The fashion show told a story. And then they got introduced to loads of new brands from the north of England that are doing great work. So now they've, would consider, if they need a coat, going to an independent brand rather than going to, a larger organisation and stuff, and supporting with their money, supporting those brands and knowing the importance of that as well. So I guess coming along with no real expectation, a lot of the people who come to our events, and then we want them to feel something, so learn something and feel something, but they've had a nice time because it's been entertaining and it's been quite chilled. Do you know what I mean? They're not being sort of talked at, but they're just listening, and then they go away with some of this information, and then hopefully they're talking about it at the dinner table, talking about it with their partners, their friends, and then there's sort of that the conversation just flows then past the event. And then I guess with corporates, when we work with corporates, I guess that most of their motivation is to support them with their ESG goals and stuff, and provide those sort of wellness and sustainability sort of workshops with staff. So yeah, it's about programming for us to meet each different individual group and how they will tick, what they'll engage with, and thinking about that. But that's the bit I love, actually, thinking about all those different programs for different demographics and groups of people.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. That's great. I think that leads us nicely. I think we're going to go to a question from the Q&A now from the audience. And I'm going to ask Fiona and then Nat to come in on this one. So this is a question from Daniel, who asks, what do you all think about the definition of your work as activism versus soft activism? I wonder whether the subcategory of soft activism risks trivializing fashion activist work, especially in a field which is traditionally underrepresented in the wider activist space. Or is the term soft activism intended more as a gateway or safe space for those who would not want to jump straight into traditional activism to get involved? I think fashion activism has such strong power, and I wouldn't want its impact being dampened by the mindset that it can only be soft activism. So that's a really interesting and I think thought-provoking question. I'm going to hand to Fiona to come in on that. What do you think about the definition of soft activism or quiet activism, as we've mentioned earlier?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, soft, quiet, everyday, etc. There's many terms, and I think it captures the same kind of thing. activism, as we conventionally understand it, isn't necessary for everyone, and not everyone can necessarily participate in it. The thinking behind this kind of work, I think, is that it can, in many ways, be more powerful in terms of bringing about change, changing behaviour, changing ideas. Because the idea is that it's actually involves activities that are part of our everyday lives that we live. So essentially, it's lived activism above all. And the idea is it can be super inclusive. So I think when we think of it, the whole thing around textiles and fashion and everything, it's a very coded, female-coded, feminine world, and the domestic spaces and crafting and all of that kind of thing, the relationship. So a lot of the thinking sort of came from that. But what I felt about it was that these are very powerful activities, the things we do in our homes, and taking crafting out into the street, obviously, is very powerful just in itself, by breaking down those kind of ideas about public and private. So my thinking behind it is these kind of ideas are just as powerful as going out with a placard. And in fact, it doesn't mean you can't do one or the other. You can do both, maybe even at the same time. You can knit and whatever and placard at the same time. So, and I'm sure many people do. So that it's not either or, but it's actually extending what activism can be about, and perhaps helping. We feel helpless a lot. A lot of the people that get involved in our projects are interested. They feel angry about fast fashion and what that fashion is doing to the world, that those structures and those that industry is doing to them. They want, but they're helpless. How can we, bring about change? And the very idea of actually connecting with others and doing everything like what all of these people talking here are doing, and what's happening in the Woven Festival, actually gives agency to people, and agency through creativity and pleasure and community and all of those kind of things. I think it's a very, very powerful thing.
Thank you, Fiona. And I can see, Julia, you have your hand up, so I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Fiona kind of touched on that really. I was going to say they're not mutually exclusive, and I think it depends who your audience is. I think we're all here because we are embedded within our communities and want to be really inclusive and open, and are here like day in, day out for people in our local towns, so that everyday activism, I guess, is kind of more like Fiona said, the gentle stuff. But yeah, I'd be the first one with the placard marching down Manchester, Westminster, and I'll be marching in Manchester as well, but Westminster. But for when it's a policy, if a specific policy change needs to be made, and it's only the politicians, and that's that kind of big kind of radical activism needs to happen, then yes, we galvanize everybody, and we make those things happen as well. But I think it depends who your audience is that you're trying to engage and what the change is. But I agree with you. In no way do I want the outrage and the anger to subside, because we need it. There's a lot that's wrong, and there's a lot that needs to change, and we need to keep shouting about it.
Thank you, Julia. Nat, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to unmute myself desperately. I think, this is not my only project. And in November, I'm working with a group of activists, incredible people, to bring the first Reclaim the Night to Wakefield. And that will be placards, that will be banners. We will be taken to the streets, and we will be creative in those banners. And there'll be textiles, don't you worry. But I think that thing of taking to the streets, if that's yarn bombing or if that's in a march, I think the power is in people coming together. And I absolutely agree with Julia in the sense that we do need to get a bit louder. I think we do need to start working with the people that we work with to say it is activism. Because like Alison was saying, am I an activist? Am I not an activist? I work with the WI over in Flockton, and they do the most incredible things. They are activists, but we need to kind of identify in the way that we talk about them and to them that they are at the heart of activism. They're absolutely amazing. WI is where, where a lot of activism starts, really. and bringing people together. So I think that we do need to kind of progress sometimes into that louder state. And I think we've also kind of touched on impact and evaluation and measuring in terms of trying to make the case for various different activities, whether that's community activities, sustainability. And I really worry that and I suppose it's because I come from the arts background where we've been told, well, we're very creative and all of the stuff that you give us is very woolly, but what's the impact? I think we're still in that state. And I personally, as a producer, call for projects like this, where we're all together and we are looking at impact, we're looking at change, for tools to be able to make that case, because we want to make that case for policy change. We want to make that change in Westminster and Manchester, obviously, and Huddersfield. But I think there's, that soft activism. How do we move that soft activism into policy change is a big question.
Thank you, Nat. Thank you for all those responses. I think there's a really interesting kind of sort of discussion about the kind of public and private nature of textile making, which is sort of coming through there. And thanks, Nat, also for touching on that question of impact. I think that leads into the next question that we've had in the Q&A. I'm going to ask Jo to respond to this one first, and then Bryony. So this is a question from Katie, and Katie asks, what do you think changes people's attitudes towards fast fashion? As a textile artist, sometimes I feel like I'm in a textile echo chamber. My friends and I all sew our own clothes. How do you get that sustainable message out to as many people as possible? So Jo, if I can come to you first.
Yeah, so I should say I've been grappling with this for the best part of 20 years, teaching fashion students particularly. Experience actually seems to be the best way to get through to people. The more they can actually understand how things are made, where they've come from. I mean, I think, was it you, Bryony, who said the 10 hours to make the £2 T-shirt? These kinds of experiences actually bring home the news story messages that you see on TV about. We just had one here in Norway about workers being exploited at Temu. So these sorts of stories, but do you have to experience those in some way yourself? So information does work to a certain extent. The more people know about things, it does have an impact. But then I'm looking for these sort of forums of engagement. How do we steer people away from the fast fashion and harness this kind of, as you say, anger and dissatisfaction with those systems, and provide places and spaces to develop an alternative, a viable alternative?
Thank you, Jo. Bryony, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I just agree with that too, really. I mean, I wish I did know how to get everyone who wasn't engaged on these issues engaged, because we'd be doing it, but we do our best through, just what Jo was saying, and also kind of meeting people where they are. Alison kind of touched on that a bit, and it's something that we always try and do in terms of, and Julia was saying this as well, different people are going to respond to different messages. So a lot of it is around experiencing something, but a lot of it is around just seeing alternatives, and alternatives being accessible to you. And, you're able to go to a shop where you can buy all your sewing equipment and materials secondhand. People want to do the right thing, but it's just not always easy for them to find out about stuff. I think it's about just kind of doing our best to reach people through all the different ways, whether that's through rage or whether through experiencing practical alternatives.
Thank you, Bryony. Vadim, you have your hand raised. I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I just want to add a minor point from a business perspective or entrepreneurial perspective. Still, probably the majority of consumers are buying fashion because of price or because of convenience, or just because of fashion itself. However, there are ways to communicate your message in a very, again, subtle manner. For instance, I know that some companies are offering lifelong warranty for certain expensive, items of clothing. This could attract a consumer who cares about how much they spend, for instance, for an expensive piece of clothing. But at the same time, it sends a very subtle message. Look, you don't have to, you don't have to buy a new thing to look fashionable. And other brands offer to return your items, or they offer to repair, etc. So there are also some commercial ways in to send that, to send the message that fast fashion is not really sustainable, and bring broader audience, to what is important for you.
Thank you, Vadim. That's great. So we're very close to the end of this 90-minute panel. So before we wrap up, a reminder that this is recorded, so you can access the recording via the Woven website. I'm just going to come to our activist creatives very briefly. I'd like everybody just a word or a line before we leave, just to kind of sum up. What will we be proud of in the future about our work if we're thinking 10, 20, 50 years into the future? What stories would you like to tell about your work? What would you like to be proud of? I'm going to come to Bryony first.
I would like to look back and say that we were part of a movement that was the beginning of the end of capitalism, the start of the unraveling of, consumer culture and moving towards sharing, working together, community-led stuff. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Nat?
I think I'm more inclined to the idea of care and looking after each other. And in 50 years' time, I'd like to see that we are caring for each other, and that radical care is not a thing. Care should not be radical.
Thank you. Jo?
I'd like to think that my work perhaps results in some people discovering how easy and fun it is to remake and reuse your clothing.
Thank you. Vadim?
Well, I would like to be remembered as an academic who worked together with communities to resist greenwashing, who used my research to uphold integrity, bring focus of attention to lived experiences, and stay grounded in the values that truly matter to communities, especially disadvantaged and marginalized communities.
Thank you. Alison?
I would say that we might not have changed the whole system overnight, but we helped people to see they had power, and that's where all change starts.
Thank you. Fiona?
Yeah, sorry. I'd like people to have reimagined and rethought and remade their relationship with fashion, and I'm particularly interested in looking to the past rather than the future. That fashion is no longer about fast change in the future and always fast change, but rather about taking time, looking back, looking at the garments you have, and looking at understanding them through your emotional relationship with them, your memories, your relationship with others, and valuing that.
Thank you, Fiona. Letty and Sally?
Everyone said such amazing things, but I think for us, staying true to yourself and the message, and the commitment to making this planet a much better place, and especially with the care factor as well and community.
I think we're quite proud to be part of this rethinking of fashion, really, the whole thing, trying to make it better, trying to be more caring, all those things that people have said. But a little personal note, I think, because I always taught the history of costume, for us, making something that has been sustainable and well made, in 50 years' time, it would be lovely that our jacket would be part of the history of costume as well. So
Julia, I'm going to give you the last word.
Being part of changing the narrative around what high street fashion means, having built infrastructure that celebrates fashion and textiles in a very different way.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to everybody who's joined us today. A reminder again to take another look at the Woven programme of events that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. Do stay in touch, and thanks again. Bye.